Hello YouTube, Robert Alvarez, the Psychic Witch, also known as Mr. Lighting on a Fan, and what I would not do for a cloudy day right now. I'm telling you, I'm like this bright ass sun. Anyway, I'm just going to be like doing this back and forth, and I apologize for that. Okay, so, plus this is a nice change of pace for me to do a video in the daytime. So, one of my wonderful followers, YouTube followers, Warrior Goddess, what a badass username, by the way, asked me if I ever did a video on how I became a card reader. And I had to think for a moment because, well, frankly, it's been a while since I've actually thought about the story behind that. So, let's go back in time a little bit, shall we? Okay, so I remember when I was 8 and a half, there was a brand new bookstore that opened up in my area. It was called Books at Discount. I loved that store. I was so excited that this store was opening. Now mind you, I'm 8 and a half. That I asked my, the neighbor upstairs had a daughter named Vicky. And I remember asking Vicky to take me to the store. And she did. And I remember, it's a little warm in here, even with the fan, so pardon me. Flash a little bit. Anyway, so what happened was, I remember going to the store and I was so happy. All these beautiful books, all these tables with books and shelves with books, and I remember I saw this pack and I didn't know what it was. So I remember asking Dorothy, who was one of the owners, I said, "What's this?" And she said, it's tarot cards. And I was very intrigued. I'm like, tarot cards? You know, so here I am at 8 and a half, I don't know. So I remember. Now, this was the Rider-Waite, which is also known as the Rider-Waite Smith. And I can't tell if that's a spider. That's a big-ass spider. Wow. Sorry, I'm just like really intrigued by this. Oh, it looked bigger on the shelf, but okay. Okay. Anyway, so, I was very intrigued by that. It was the Rider-Waite. It was the Rider-Waite Smith. I'd never seen this tarot deck before, at least in this lifetime anyway. And I remember the deck was $14. Now these days you can't even buy a mini deck for $14. So it was a steal. So I purchased it. Now, some of you might think, especially those of you that don't know the story, that I started learning it right away. No. I let it collect dust for 8 years. So then at 16 and a half years of age, my brother's dating this girl, lovely lady, lovely woman. I loved her energy from the get-go. And she was like, "Can I borrow your tarot cards?" I said, "Sure." Would you believe I had the nerve to get jealous? I don't use this thing for 8 years. All it's doing on my bookshelf is collecting dust. Don't even look at it, don't even touch it, and then after 8 years, this bitch, me, has the nerve to get jealous. I was like, you know, of course that made no sense to me. So I thought to myself, you know what, if I'm going to get jealous over this, let me find out why. So, hold on a minute, because I don't want my toast to burn. I'll be right back. Okay, so what happened was, I said to myself, you know what, I'm going to learn about this. I'm going to open the box, take out the cards, look at what the little white booklet, or the LWB, as some of my fellow tarotists say, and then from there, go from there. And that's what I did. So, now, I will tell you that at the time, my tarot reading skills were very, I normally would say raw, but what they were was they were very absent, or at the very least, they were very untrained and undeveloped. So what I would do is, I would use the Celtic cross spread because that's how it was taught in the booklet. Now let's say, and I'm going to use the Little White booklet from a tarot deck that I've reviewed in a previous video, Universal Goddess Tarot. I really wish they would make a new revised version and include a card with this goddess and this goddess. I call her the day goddess because that's the sun. I call her the night goddess because that's the moon. Here's the funny thing though. Both of them have the same scepter and the triple moon symbol is on the pentacle. So anyway. So let's pretend this is a Little White booklet. Well, it is a Little White booklet, but still. Now let's say the card that came out was the Ace of Swords. So I would go to the Ace of Swords and I would read the whole thing. Like I said, very undeveloped, very untrained, but that's how I gave readings at the time. Now, I remember not too long after I began learning the tarot and working with the tarot and reading cards with the tarot and whatnot, a friend of mine named Bob had invited me to his birthday party. So I said to him, you know what, I'll give you a free reading as a gift. Which, in a way, was a joke, because at the time, giving readings professionally was the furthest thing from my mind. So I think at this time I was like 18 or 19, something like that. Or around that time, I'm not sure. So I said, you know what, I'm going to do what all the other professionals, I'm going to do what all the other psychics do. I'm going to take my cards, put it in a scarf. I didn't have silk, but I had this beautiful cotton scarf that was pretty large. It was almost shawl length, or shawl size, but it was a really nice one. And it was a red and white print, and it was 100% cotton, but it was a natural fiber. I didn't care, so I put the cards in the scarf, and I wrapped it up, and then I went to Bob's birthday party, had a great time, and and then I said, are you ready for your reading? And he said, sure. So I make a little show of like unwrapping the cards and taking out the cards, and there's no Little White booklet. And I thought, And then I told Bob, and he was like, is that going to be a problem? And I thought, I don't know. And then I said to him, I don't know. Let's see what happens. So I remember, now the tarot deck that I used, I think it's called the Egyptian Tarot. It's identical in imagery to the Brotherhood of White Light tarot deck. And in the Egyptian Tarot, the cards are treated to look like papyrus. And I remember the first card that came out was the Moon. And I remember looking at the Moon card, and I said to myself, he has to choose between two men. And I remember saying to him, you have to choose between two men. Now the reality was he didn't have to choose between two men. At the time he felt he needed to choose between two men. And he did. I don't remember which one he chose, but it was fascinating to me because ever since then, I've never seen the Moon card with that interpretation. For me, the Moon card usually represents something else. And it represents different things depending upon what my intuition is telling me. Every once in a while, I'll use a traditional interpretation that's usually associated with the Moon card, but more often than not, it's whatever my psychic guides tell me. And that's with all the tarot cards and all the cards of the divination decks and oracle card decks that I use. But it was fascinating to me. I was like, wow, here I am listening to this intuition, this wisdom, whatever you want to call it, when one is between the ages of 16 and 18, and it's like, okay. And it was just amazing. And I wound up giving 4 readings that night at this party. And the last reading of the night was the most vivid for me. Because I remember I kept asking this guy questions. But all of the questions were answered with a yes. And it was sort of like, you're dealing with a financial situation, you're dealing with a professional situation, and you're going to have to make a choice where but that means people are going to be going their separate ways. And it has to do with somebody's death, and it has to do with this and that. And every single question I asked him, he answered with a yes. And it was the most fascinating thing to me. And I remember, over the years, I've read different articles on how to give more effective readings, how to give more accurate readings, articles on what professional psychics are supposed to do, what professional psychics really shouldn't do, and in several of these articles, one of the things that I'd read was a professional psychic really is not supposed to ask questions. Now, that may or may not be true. What I do believe, and what I do professionally, is if I don't understand something, like if the client says something, or if, let's say, the client asks a question and I don't understand what the hell he or she said, I'm going to ask him or her to clarify. Also, if the client gives me a very long question, like let's say, I can't even give you an example, but let's say that it takes roughly 10 to 15 seconds for the client to ask a question, I might get confused, because in that 10 to 15 seconds, that client may express a concern, a fear, and basically be asking about three different things. Like when people ask about relationships, I always ask them to specify, because there are romantic relationships, there are familial relationships, there are professional relationships, there are interpersonal relationships with acquaintances. So, to me, it's not always going to be about romance, especially since, for the longest time I was so anti-romantic relationships. So, now it's my personal wish that everyone be in a functional, romantic, healthy romantic relationship. Anyway, so I will ask people to clarify. When people ask about work and career and they ask about money, to me they're two different things. Because I know, especially as somebody who's been teaching prosperity classes since November 2001, people can receive money from various avenues and channels. It doesn't have to be just from one's position of employment. It could be from an inheritance, it could be a gift, it could be from a stipend, it could be from an allowance, it could be from anything. It doesn't have to be from, well, this is my position of employment and this is my salary. No, it could be from anything. It could be from anyone. It could be from a lottery. So it really isn't just about, oh, well, this is how I make my money. No, this is how you receive. This is one avenue of how you receive money. So when somebody asks about work and career and asks about finances, they're not the same. They're not identical to me. They're not mutually exclusive to me. So after this party, I would continue to give readings from time to time, but it wasn't until my early 20s that I remember I used to work in this shoe store. I used to work in two different shoe stores in this mall, or other shopping center, but whatever you want to call it, mall, shopping center, whatever. And I remember I had, shortly before, I was in Manhattan, and I remember I was walking by a Barnes & Noble bookseller store, and I saw somebody giving readings, and I thought to myself, that would be cool. I love books. I would love to give readings in the bookstore. So I remember this shopping center had a Barnes & Noble bookseller store. So I had approached, I remember asking one of the employees, who I could talk to about giving readings in the store. And this employee said, well, you would talk to the community relations manager. And they had a different term at the time, but I don't remember what it was. I think it was community relations coordinator. Anyway, so I spoke to the community relations manager for this particular Barnes & Noble bookseller store. And what she said to me was, if I were to give readings in the store, it would have to be free. Now, that didn't work for me. And I think I told that to her, and I said, but I did thank her for her time, and then I left. So because I would pass this particular Barnes & Noble bookseller store before going to the bus stop to go back home, I would stop in after I would finish my workday. So I remember one day I was leaving and the community relations manager was coming in. And I was running behind schedule because I knew that with this bus, if I missed it, I would need to wait at least half an hour for the next one. But she approached me. She was like, I wanted to talk to you about something. I said, okay. Now, at this point in my life, I was finally learning to shut the fuck up. Like, you know what, Robert? Let somebody else talk first. And that's what happened. Because I really thought to myself, if I had opened my mouth, I would have closed so many doors for myself. So what she said to me was, have you ever thought about leading a tarot lecture? And at the time, I really hadn't, because, at the time, I had only taught the tarot privately. I had never led a tarot course, or a tarot lecture, or a tarot class. And I enjoyed it. I had a fantastic time. I remember I was wearing this beautiful double-breasted blazer, and it was a plum blazer with a black lining. And I remember the most beautiful compliment that the community relations manager gave me. She said to me, "You look like a rock star." I was like, "Well, I like that. I like that. I look like a rock star." Yeah. So, so that's how it all came about. And I wound up giving free tarot lectures at a grand total of 9 different Barnes & Noble bookseller stores in New Jersey. And 3 of them in that very same Barnes & Noble bookseller store. And it was so wonderful. I enjoyed it so much. It was a lovely experience. And I remember I was looking forward to leading my 10th free tarot lecture at a Barnes & Noble bookseller store. But then around the time that I wanted to lead a 10th, Barnes & Noble booksellers changed their policy, meaning that anybody who wanted to lead a free lecture in their stores was required to have either their own book or their own CD to promote in the stores. And I said, okay, I was a little upset because, I was looking forward to this wonderful new opportunity and a new store and whatnot. But it was okay. And the irony is so many Barnes & Noble bookseller stores have closed since then. So it's not like... Oh, I'm so sorry. That was like a massive flash of light. So, that's pretty much it. I had a great time doing it. It was a beautiful learning experience. And I was able to recommend so many great tarot books to so many different great people. The other thing was that after a while, I began to, in addition to reading different articles on how to be a professional psychic who uses the Sacred Tarot, I also began following my intuition more and discovering my psychic guides and confiding in them and really valuing what divine guidance they give me. And to this day, my psychic guides are an invaluable part of my life, my readings, my metaphysical classes, and they certainly make a huge difference in my life, even on a personal level. So I think that covers how I became a professional. Well, actually, to use the exact phrasing that Warrior Goddess used, how I became a card reader. Of course, if any of you have any additional questions, feel free to ask. Write a comment. And if you have any recommendations on different tarot decks, different divination decks, I'll do my best to recommend them. These days, I find that people are doing a much better job of finding their own tarot and divination decks, or that they're just coming to them almost effortlessly. So that's that. But if you do feel divinely guided to ask me about different tarot decks or different oracle card decks for recommendations, I'm more than happy to give you some. I think that's it. But feel free to make a comment, ask any additional questions, all that other good stuff. And if you have any other ideas for future videos, I'm open. And the next 2 weeks, well, this week I'm going to be pretty busy. The first and second weeks of November, I have nothing scheduled as of right now. That could change. And if it does, you'll soon find out. But there are some videos that are coming up because I know that there's something really cool happening in mid to late November, and I want to make a video about it. So yeah, anyway, I can't think of anything else. So YouTube, thank you very much for everything. Warrior Goddess, thank you for the great video idea. And I wish all of you watching many, many blessings. Until next time, bye.